Hello friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Breck Rowell. Alright, it's the day after I stained and finished the extender pieces on my table, and today we're expecting a shipment in the mail of a new power supply that's going to allow me to hook up those switchers, the track switchers, and get those automated rather than having to manually switch them. But that isn't here yet. The mail says it should be here in the next hour or so, so I'm waiting for it, but there's a lot that we can do before then. First thing we can do, of course, is we can put these extension pieces back on. They're just set on there right now, but they need to be screwed into place so they hold up and don't move around a lot, because obviously you don't want that happening on your trains. We are not attempting to simulate earthquakes, so having plate movement is not a good thing here. So I'm going to reattach this to the platform, and then we need to reinstall the track on top of all of this. So that's going to take a few minutes, and I'll get that all done. Alright, so this is basically the track configuration I had before, and I've been kind of thinking about this. I'm going to mix this up a little bit. I like the basic outer track section that goes all the way around here. That's right, but what I did is I made this little switch track right here, and then another switch track here that pulls into parallel tracks. And I was thinking, you know, we'll kind of create the impression that this is the business district, and they'll have a little spur off of the main line to pull trains in. But the thing is, I was thinking about this, since the train goes this way around the track, I want to have the spur going the other direction. So rather than having the car pull off this way and into the loading dock, which would waste a whole bunch of space, loading space, because you're going to have the engine and the coal car that are taking up a bunch of the space, I thought it made more sense for the train to go past the spur and then back into the spur. That way you have all the cars that you're going to be loading or unloading in the back, and not have to make room for the engine itself. So I think that means turning this little section around, and I got a few extra track pieces. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to put a spur right here and have it pull off, and then we'll do a second spur and have it divide off into two tracks going this way. And I think that'll be a little bit more realistic and will work better for this. So I'm going to mess with that right now, and I'll catch up with you in a few. Alright, a little bit more time has passed by, and I have reconfigured the switch track a little bit. Now it is backing out this way. This is going to be the little energy sector or industrial sector of the train track, and then the residential area that will be over there. That sort of makes sense, I think. At this point, I'm trying to figure out how I want to route the wire, because I got to have a wire going from each of these switch tracks. Normally I would just drill into the board, but I don't want to drill through this thing. This thing's a table that's going to be used for, you know, it's got to look nice. You know, this is just an extension to make the train track work. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the wire out to here. We're going to drill a small hole through here and another one small one through this piece. Run this underneath, route it over here to these switches, which I've mounted on a piece of board. I kind of realized looking a little closer at them today that these things can daisy chain together. So you can just connect them one to the other. Then you provide the power for it here, and the power then goes to each of the individual switches. So like I said, I gotta kind of figure that out. But first thing I want to do is kind of get the wire routed, and so we're going to do that right now. In fact, maybe it makes sense to put the switcher right here, because then I can make a small hole right here in the middle. One of the problems you run into is if you're going to run this wire through it, it's got to be big enough to hold, you know, to allow this connector to go through. But if I run it through just right here, then I can route the wire through the hole, plug it into the individual switcher, and not have to make that big of a hole. It'll just have to be tiny enough of a hole to handle the thickness of the wire. So I think I'm going to do that a little bit. I got one other thing here, and that is the switches. The power supply just arrived, so we're also going to get that hooked up. I think I'm going to mount that underneath the table, because it doesn't need to be seen or have anything done to it. It'll probably just plug into the same power strip that the whole rest of the setup plugs into, so that when I turn it on, that power supply comes on automatically. I was thinking about plugging it into that one, but then I'd have to remember to turn both of the switches on if I wanted to use them. If I do it the other one, which is over here, then I only have to plug in one place. So I think that makes more sense. That's what we're going to do. So let's get this thing opened up and see what we got. Alright, so I've routed the wire from the switch tracks, made a little hole in the board to accommodate that, to allow it to go underneath. And it's coming over here to the switcher itself. I've also drilled a couple of holes here for the wire to go through, and a hole here for the power cable to go in. Now, before I get everything hooked up and routed and get the wires all hidden and stuff like that, I want to hook the whole thing up and make sure it works first. So, next thing we got to do is unpack the power supply. Okay, I'm running into a little bit of a setback here. This isn't working the way I understand it should work. Now, I gotta admit, there aren't a lot of instructions online about how you're supposed to do this, but I did find a couple of YouTube channels where somebody showed you how to wire them up, and it looks like what I'm doing is correct. I've got power going from the power supply over to the switcher, then the switcher goes to the switch track, and I should just be able to flip the switch back and forth, and the track should switch. But it isn't, and it isn't working on any of my switchers. It isn't working on any of my switch tracks. So I don't know at this point. I did find a single page description online that shows you how to wire it up, and once again, I'm doing it exactly the way the instructions said. So I've actually subscribed to the Bachman Facebook page, and I've asked a question there, and I'm going to see if they can get back to me and if we can figure out what's going on here, because this should be working, and at this point it isn't, and it isn't anything obvious. It seems like this should work the way it is, but it isn't. So I don't know. We're going to put it on hold here until we can figure out what's going on. Hopefully somebody will get back to me quickly. All right, it's the next day, and I still haven't gotten any kind of a response from Bachman Trains from the Facebook page. So I think what we're going to probably end up doing is we're going to stop this video right now, and I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time thinking about this, tinkering around with it. I know I got power on the power supply. I can measure it with my multimeter. I know I got power going through the wire to the input of the switch, but once I get to the switch, I seem to lose all the power, or most of the power. There should be 17 volts coming off of this. I can detect about 4 volts when this switch is triggered. That shouldn't be working that way, as I understand it. It should be a 12 to 16 volt power on that switch. So, like I said, I'm going to think about this a little bit, but I do have the train basically all set up now, and it's working really well. And I told you at one point about a little magnet that goes under the track, and when you park the car at that location, you can couple or decouple the cars. And I've actually got that working pretty well, and I'm going to show you that in a second, because that's kind of neat, because that's sort of a big thing about how I wanted this to work. So like I said, there's a little magnet under this section of the track right here, and that, if you stop the cars at that location, it will allow you to either couple or decouple from the cars. So I'm thinking that's a good place to do it, because what we can have the locomotive do is pull the train to here, stop, back into the switch track, and drop off all the cars, and then just take off with the engine in the coal car. I'm going to actually show you what that looks like, because I practiced a little bit the other night and got it working pretty well. You're going to have to excuse all the rubbish around the train right now. I'm still trying to figure out what that power supply issue is, but you can still use your imagination a little bit. So I'm going to pull the train past the switch track, all the way past it. And now that we're past the switch track, I'm going to go over here, manually switch to switch track, because normally I'd be able to do that with a little power switch, but that isn't working, so I'm just having to do it manually. I'm going to put the train into reverse, and we're going to back into that spur. And when I get to the freight car, between the freight car and the coal car, matches up where that little guy is, I'm going to stop it right there, go back into forward. And at this point, the the 4 cars in the back should have decoupled from the engine and the coal car, and it should, and just the 2 cars should move forward. And see, that's exactly how I want that to work. So see, that's the beauty when this thing, if you're gonna be playing, let's pretend here, let's get some paperwork off of here so we don't derail the train. That's no fun. But see, that's gonna be part of the fun here, is if you want to back the freight cars back into the little switch track to be unloaded, you can decouple them from the main train, and the main train can go on its way. I could theoretically get a second set of cars and have it hook up to the second set of cars and take that one away, take those cars away. But then I can use the same process. Once again, I'm going to speed them up a little bit. And I got to remember to switch the switch track back to the right direction here so that the train can go by. Like I said, this will all be able to be done automatically at some point, hopefully. Get the car past the switch track, slow it down, switch the track, put the train back into reverse, back into the switch track. I can then pick up the cars. And now that I've moved that junction between the coal car and the first freight car past where the magnet is, now when I go back into forward, I can pull the whole thing with me. And so, I don't know, I've been practicing that a little bit, so that's kind of cool that this thing can do that. So anyway, stay tuned. We're going to play with this some more and try and figure out what's going on with these switch tracks and the switchers themselves. It should work, but like I said, we got to play around with it a little bit and figure out what's going on. So we'll catch up with that on another video. Until then, I think that's all I have for today. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you next time on Escaping the Mouse. Good night.